Welcome to a special Best of episode of Best Ever. I'm Scott Eblin. Over the first season, I had the privilege of sitting down with 12 remarkable leaders, from Olympic gold medalists to Fortune 500 executives, from doctors transforming healthcare to entrepreneurs building the media companies of the future. And across all these conversations, one theme has emerged again and again as the foundation of effective leadership: the power of listening. I often tell my coaching clients that if you're only going to develop one relational routine, make it listening. Why? Because listening is the killer app for relationships. It's the foundational behavior that makes every other relational routine possible. When you truly listen, you build trust. And when you build trust, you create the conditions for authentic connection, meaningful collaboration, and sustainable results. Today, I want to share some of the most powerful insights about listening and relational routines from this season's conversations. You're going to hear from a former CEO who learned the importance of listening from his grandfather at age 7, a physician who turned active listening into a systematic practice for virtual care, a coach who understands that great partnerships are built on knowing what your partner needs, and leaders who've discovered that curiosity and showing genuine interest in others isn't just good manners, it's good business. Let's start at the beginning with a story that has shaped an entire career. Harry Kramer is someone I've come to admire. Former chairman and CEO of Baxter International, he's now a clinical professor of leadership at Northwestern and the author of 4 best-selling books on values-based leadership. But his understanding of leadership started much earlier than his corporate career. Here's Harry sharing a formative memory from when he was just 7 years old. I've read a story you've told of taking a walk as a 7-year-old boy with your grandfather, and as you passed statues of military leaders, you asked him why there were so many wars. And his answer, and this was in the Northwestern Alumni Magazine, I guess, his answer was that people don't take the time to listen to one another and don't reflect on how short of a time they're on this earth. They're only after power and wealth, your granddad said, things that are very temporary. The fact that you remembered that moment from age 7, I think, tells us a lot about the big impression and impact that had on you and your life. How would you summarize the impact of that on the course of the rest of your life, that moment with your grandfather?
Yeah, I mean, even today, Scott, I get a little emotional about it.
Yeah.
He was a very special guy, and that whole idea is, you and I know, Scott. There's so many things going on, and we're running around, and we confuse activity and productivity. Let's just go faster and faster. And that whole idea of why are we on this earth, and the short time we are, why can't we find ways to get along with one another, regardless of location, regardless of your faith, regardless of whatever. And that idea of, treat every person the way you'd like to be treated, you could call it golden rule or whatever. And even when I was a little kid, it was always sort of like, hey, I realize I am here for a very short time. And it's not negative for me at all. It's just, that's just a fact. I was a math guy, right? It's a fact. And once I realized that, I really try to conduct my life that way of, hey, we're going to have careers, we're going to do things, but just putting things into perspective and taking the time. Some of us would call it prayer. I teach in a secular university, so I call it self-reflection. Okay, pick your turn. Depends on what school I'm talking with. But there's this whole idea of, I literally refer to it as, Scott, of taking the time to slow down, turn off the noise, and ask yourself some of those very, very basic questions. What are my values? What is my purpose? What really matters?
What struck me about Harry's story and what stayed with him for nearly 5 decades is that his grandfather didn't say wars happen because of bad strategy or limited resources. He said they happen because people don't take the time to listen to and understand one another. Think about that. At the root of our biggest conflicts, personal to global, it's a failure to listen. But here's what's encouraging. Listening is a skill. It's something we can get better at. And some of my season 1 guests have made listening a systematic practice that's transformed the way they lead. Dr. Cynthia Horner is the Chief Medical Officer at Amwell, a virtual care company. She leads more than 3,000 clinicians who provide healthcare remotely, and she's had to figure out how to create genuine connection and deliver quality care when you're not in the same room with the patient. The techniques she's developed aren't just for healthcare, they are a master class in active listening that every leader can learn from.
It's really important when you're working with a team and when you're, so I got two sort of perspectives. One is the patient provider interaction, but that it's the same as when I am working. I don't do patient care anymore, and I haven't for probably about 2 years, but I'm leading a very large team. And I have had to develop the discipline or carry over the discipline from my patient interactions that I need to look at the camera and I need to see what other people are seeing, honestly, first to say, is my lighting any good? We train all of our clinicians in what we call webside manner because it's not the same.
Website, I want to make sure I heard that correctly.
Yeah,
Webside manner as opposed to
webside
bedside. Yeah,
manner.
very good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we have a specific soft skills course that we train our clinicians on because it's not the same as knock on the door, open the door, come in, sit down. And there's sort of the trope, if you will, of the distracted clinician that's constantly typing on their
Mm-hmm.
computer,
Mm-hmm.
even in a room. So take that into what I just did on this video call. You're not even looking at me. And if I turn off my light and you can't really see me, patients don't have those visual cues that they have when they come into a brick and mortar space of, okay, I am at the doctor's office.
Mm-hmm.
So we really, you need to go above and beyond when you're on a video, whether it's clinically or whether it's in an executive position, whether it's working with your team, to make sure that the messages that are getting conveyed are the messages you want to convey. I'm attending to you. I'm listening. I'm not multitasking.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see me and that I'm trustworthy. We have all of our doctors. It's a little over the top for a brick and mortar space, but all of our doctors have to wear white coats. All of our clinicians have to wear white coats
Mm-hmm.
because you're getting on with somebody who's on a video call. How do you know that they're not like your
Right.
neighbor playing a doctor on TV? And you don't typically touch people when you're in meetings, and certainly but you do in a clinical environment. So you have to be able to make up for those lost senses, but you still have your two primary senses, hearing and vision. And so leverage those really significantly. And so how do you make sure that you're receiving the right information? One is in a clinical environment, I might, if somebody says I twisted my ankle, I might say, okay, well, I want to see your ankle. So can you, move your camera and show me your ankle? Now, can you be my hands? Can you
Mm-hmm.
push on
Mm-hmm.
that little part that
Mm-hmm.
sticks out right there? That's called, so can you push on that? Tell me, does that hurt? And then they say, yes, that hurts. Okay. At the end of that encounter, the clinicians will do a summary and say, so what I hear you saying is, et cetera. Did I get that right? What am I missing? Do you have any questions? And that's really critical. And I do that in my meetings as well. There's a funny balance. It's a little easier for me from my perspective as a clinician. As an executive, there's the balance between doing that in a way that engages my team and helps them know that they're heard
Mm-hmm.
and conveying also a sense of competence. And it's not, okay, I'm not really sure I understood. So can you tell me, it's saying, I think what I hear you say is X, and I'd like to reframe it this way.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to you? And is there anything else that you would want to put on the table that frames this differently? So, but I think it's that dialogue piece and just making sure that you're doing good interviewing techniques.
Yeah, I mean, the resounding phrase in my head as you describe all of that is active listening, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's you just went through, and we should put this in the show notes. You just went through a brilliant checklist of what makes a great active listener, checking for understanding. Let me see if I understood this correctly. Could you repeat that back to me and, maybe reframe it for me? Just so many
Mhm.
things.
And then the summary, which I will say, particularly as a clinician, I find that time of summarizing the takeaways, or even frankly, as an executive, summarizing the takeaways, there will
Mhm.
be somebody, and oftentimes it's the quieter person, if it's not a one-on-one clinical visit, but it's the quieter person in a meeting that'll say, raise their hand and say, what about X? And I really want to listen to those folks, because usually there's something really pithy in there. Or if I don't agree that that's relevant to this, it tells me that, okay, why did they end up over here? And then I've got to figure out what's happening in the dynamic that they're like over there and the rest of the group is over here.
Did you catch all that? Let me highlight Cynthia's active listening checklist because it's so simple, practical, and actionable. First, check for understanding. Like, let me see if I got this right. Then summarize what you heard next. What I hear you saying is, and then third, invite correction. What am I missing? Fourth, reframe for clarity. I'd like to reframe it this way. Does that make sense? And then finally, listen for the quieter voices. There's usually something pithy there, she told us. This isn't just good medicine. This is good leadership. Every single one of these techniques translates directly to your team meetings, your one-on-ones, your strategy sessions. But Cynthia learned one of her most important lessons about listening, not in a hospital or a corporate setting, but thousands of miles away in Sierra Leone, Africa. Cynthia spent 15 years helping build Mercy Hospital in Sierra Leone. But along the way, she learned a hard lesson about the difference between offering solutions and truly listening to understand the problem.
There is a valuable and remarkable hospital in Sierra Leone. I don't ever want to undercut that. But if I had to do this over again, I would not start with, do you think you need a hospital in this town, the second largest city in Sierra Leone? And really start with what are your primary problems in healthcare? Is it access to fresh water? And well, I'm a doctor and I don't want to be building wells out of, I don't have that knowledge and expertise. If that's really what they need, then that's where you need to start.
Yeah.
If what they need is traditional birth attendant training or nurse midwife training with kits and programs to connect the local villages and an ambulance, then that's what you should do. And really doing much more effective listening and getting less wrapped up in here's a solution and here's a hammer and I found and everything is a nail.
That's exactly what I was thinking about. Here's a solution and here's a hammer and everything else is a nail. How many times have we done that? We show up with our expertise, our experience, our ideas about what needs to happen, and we start hammering away without first listening, without asking, what are your primary problems? What do you actually need? This is where the intersection of humility and listening becomes so crucial. True listening requires us to set aside our need to be the expert, to have the answer, to solve the problem. It requires us to be simply present and genuinely curious about the other person's experience. And that takes us to Maggie Kane. Maggie founded a place at the table, Raleigh, North Carolina's first pay what you can nonprofit cafe. When I asked her what it means to be good at loving people, her answer was all about presence and really seeing others.
Yeah, as I said earlier, like the empathy piece is just like walking with people, walking alongside them. I think I especially folks in our community and how I got into this work is when I was working at the day shelter is I wasn't like there to like solve their problem. I wasn't trying to get them into housing or help them figure out where to go get clothes. I mean, sure, I was willing to do that, but I was more just like loving them and treating them as human and seeing who they were and seeing, and hearing their hopes and their dreams and their past lives and their children's lives. And I think it's just seeing people. We all want to be seen. And I think when we see each other, we realize that we're a lot more human and a lot more similar than we think. I think, society, we all know this, society tells us that there's like a us versus them mentality. And like, what if we just all saw each other as humans that are all just trying to do the next right thing and make it in this really scary, weird world? So I think it's just the empathy. It's just seeing people for who they are and not judging.
We all want to be seen. 5 simple words that capture something profound about human nature. When was the last time someone really saw you? not just looked at you, but saw you, heard your hopes and dreams, asked about your life, treated you with full dignity as a human being. When was the last time you did all of that for someone else? Here's the beautiful thing. When you truly see others, when you listen to them with genuine interest and care, you create the conditions for real connection. Trust builds, collaboration becomes possible, results follow. That brings us to one more dimension of listening that came up in my conversation with Vivek Shah. Vivek is the CEO of Ziff Davis. When he took over the company in 2010, it had 50 employees and $20 million in revenue. Today, it's a $1.4 billion company with 4,000 employees. I asked him for his one best piece of advice for being a strategic thinker. His answer? It all comes back to curiosity and listening.
So I think for me, it's all about pattern recognition. So what I've done well in business is I expose myself to lots of things in and outside of business, and then I look for patterns, and I can see things in one place that have absolutely seemingly nothing to do with my business and say, well, wait a minute, that dynamic actually can play itself here. So it's two things. It's being curious and learning as much as you can. And right now, this is the age for the curious. I mean, with AI and the potential to access knowledge, curiosity will get rewarded. So be hyper and ultra curious, and then recognize that there are patterns. And so look for the patterns that you could say, wow, well, how can that business, connect here? I've always tried to understand how something works from a business point of view. More precisely, how does this make money? I'm always fascinated by this. Like, how does that make money? And when you learn how that makes money, you may say, well, you know what? That can make me money here. And so that has been really helpful for me. So I love to read. I love to study. I love to hear about things, right? I'm like, well, how does that work? And what do you do here? And tell me about your business. And so if you're that kind of person, and you'd be amazed how much people would love to talk about their businesses. They'll talk to you about it. If you show curiosity, they're going to talk to you about it, and you're going to learn something.
People would love to talk about their businesses. If you show curiosity, they're going to talk to you about it and you're going to learn something. This is the kind of listening that creates strategic advantage. When you approach conversations with genuine curiosity, not just waiting for your turn to talk, but actually interested in understanding how things work, what makes someone tick, what they're trying to accomplish, you learn things that give you a competitive edge. And it's not manipulative. It's generous. You're giving someone the gift of your full attention. You're honoring their experience and expertise. You're building a relationship, which brings us back to where we started with relationships, partnerships. And nobody understands partnership better than an Olympic gold medalist who played a pairs sport. Dane Blanton won Olympic gold in beach volleyball in the year 2000. Today, he's the head coach of USC's women beach volleyball team and the only collegiate volleyball coach to lead his team to 4 consecutive national championships. Beach volleyball is played in pairs. I asked Dane what makes a great playing partner once the athletic skills are in place. His answer is another masterclass in empathy and partnership.
Yeah, that's a great question, because here at SC with this program, we have nutritionists, strength and conditioning coach, sports psychologists, our coaching staff. Everything is accounted for, but one of the biggest things that we do is with our sports psychologist is go over, she calls it twinship, right? How you work as a pair. And so it's fascinating, all the components, right? Sometimes you put a player with another player and then another player and another player, and they don't make anybody better. And sometimes you put a player out on the court and they make everybody better. And it's hard to find those almost intangibles. Like, why is this player always winning? and this other player isn't, even though the other players actually might be a little more skilled. And I think what it is that makes you a great pair, great chemistry on the court is knowing what your partner needs,
Hmm.
right? Because everyone's going to struggle. Hey, I'm passing the ball poorly. What do I need to do as a partner? Maybe I'm going to take more court and minimize the real estate that you're covering. And now that's going to make the opponent change their strategy because now they wanted to serve you, Scott. And now I've scooted over and I'm taking more court. So that can put you at ease. Hey, look, my partner is stepping up. He knows I'm struggling. He's stepped up. Now I can reset and get back into the game. Also, if something goes wrong, I'm struggling, I'm hitting the balls out, how am I responding as a partner to that situation? Am I, kicking rocks and kicking the sand, or am I supportive and am I putting my partner at ease, therefore making them, a better player in this tough time? And I think it's an art, to be a good partner, to listen, to know what your partner needs in the trenches, because you can't it's hard to come up with these schemes real time in the situation. You kind of have to know, hey,
Hmm.
you know what? Scott's taking care of it. He's my partner. I don't need to get on him. I already know he's already on himself,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Or maybe you're the type that's like, hey man, get me fired up. I'm struggling, or let's get a little louder. So kind of knowing that, and there is a element of acting when you're an athlete,
Hmm.
and it's almost like when you're not doing well on the court, you can still bring fire, you can still bring effort, we say fake it till you make it, right?
Hmm.
Or you can show that you're emotional and you're embarrassed. When someone hits a ball out and they in tennis and they look at the racket, right? Or they fall and they look at their foot or whatever. Instead of, it's you. It's not it's not your hand, it's not your foot.
Yeah.
It's you. You weren't paying attention.
Yeah.
And so I think not only knowing what your partner needs and being able to respond to that, but also setting that high level of effort and expectation out there. But because it is like poetry in motion, watching a good
Mm-hmm.
partnership.
It totally
Yeah,
is. Yeah, it's
they
amazing.
complement each other. They have the chemistry, and it's awesome.
Yeah. So I have to ask this question because it's one of my rare opportunities to talk with an Olympic gold medalist, tracking back to 2000 when it's an art to be a good partner, to listen, to know what your partner needs. What a perfect place to end this episode, because whether you're on a volleyball court, in a boardroom, leading a team, or building a business, the fundamental question is the same. What does your partner need? What does your teammate need? What does your colleague need? What does your life partner need? And the only way to answer that question is to listen, really listen. Here's what I want you to take away from today's conversation. First, listening is foundational. As Harry Kramer's grandfather taught him at age 7, so many of our conflicts, big and small, come down to people not taking the time to listen to one another. Make the time. Second, active listening is a skill you can develop. Use Cynthia Horner's techniques. Check for understanding. Summarize what you heard. Invite correction. Reframe for clarity. Listen for the quieter voices. Third, listen to understand the problem before you offer the solution. Remember Cynthia's lesson from Sierra Leone. Don't show up with a hammer looking for nails. Show up with genuine curiosity about what's actually needed. Fourth, see people, really see them. As Maggie Kane reminded us, we all want to be seen. Give someone the gift of your full attention and watch what happens. Fifth, approach every conversation with genuine curiosity. Like Vivek Shah, be fascinated by how things work, what makes people tick, what they're trying to accomplish. People love to talk about what matters to them if you show genuine interest. And finally, know what your partner needs. Whether you're on a volleyball team or on a team at work, or a team at home, great partnerships are built on empathy, on knowing what the other person needs to be successful. If I could give you just one small step to take from this episode, it would be this. In your next meeting, your next one-on-one, your next conversation with someone on your team, your next gathering around the dinner table, practice one element of active listening, just one. Maybe it's summarizing what you heard. Maybe it's asking, what am I missing? Maybe it's genuinely trying to understand what your partner needs before offering your solution. That's how relational and all other routines work. One small step, consistently applied, compounds into something powerful. Thanks for listening to this best of episode of Best Ever. If you found it valuable, please share it with a colleague who might benefit. And if you want more resources on developing effective relational routines, head over to my website, eblingroup.com. Until next time, keep taking those small steps of self-management that, when consistently applied, lead to your best ever outcomes.